And real quick, Matt, how long are we going about?
Like a half hour.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good afternoon. This is Karen with newclevelandradio.net podcasting, and this is a podcasting forum where we bring you what the listener wants to hear. Today's podcast is On the Lot with host Matt Jackson. And Matt Jackson is bringing us the theme of diversity. So welcome, Matt.
Karen, thank you. Thank you. It's so good to be back again. You know, a lot has happened over the last couple of days, and I am thrilled about it. I'm excited that we have our first female African-American loud, proud woman that is our vice president-elect. And I can take a deep breath. I can take a deep breath, right?
Yes, you can.
This was something that our country needed. And with how proud I am of Kamala and our country, I wanted to bring our guest on, who is a friend of mine, somebody I'm very proud of for her accomplishments. And Darcy is somebody who I went to school with. I went to college with Darcy, and she is a very strong female, empowering leader. And I wanted to bring Darcy on the show because it felt really kind of relevant with what our country is facing to have another female leader. Darcy, thank you for being here. This is going to be a wonderful time to chat with you on your journey and what you've been working on, and also this new book deal that just has come into your life, which is what caught my attention. So we are thrilled.
Great to be here.
We are thrilled to have you and just to talk about leadership and diversity and all the things, Darcy, that you have been fighting for and believing in for so long. And I think in college, before I came out, I was like, I want to marry that woman. Like, I want to marry Darcy. But then you realize, you know, there is an affinity that goes to friendship and goes to commonality and goes to a strong belief system and just whatever side of the fence you're on, you know, just believing in our world and believing in culture and people. So, Darcy.
I can't say I wasn't a tiny bit disappointed when you came out. And so happy for you.
Thank you, Darcy. You know, you've been on this leadership path for a long time. You've been doing this ever since we first met. So tell us about your career journey and how that is empowering and how it shapes some of the different cultures and contours of people's thinking.
Thank you, Matt. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you, Karen. When I graduated from college, right, we were together at that time studying math and German. I was hired in the political realm, which was a completely different path than I was anticipating going. And I spent about 20 years working in politics, campaigns, nonprofits, fighting for really educational equity, funding for public schools, diversity, social equality, all of those things. And spent the most recent, was working for 12 years as the director of one of our U.S. senators' office. And when he retired after 24 years in the Senate, I hired a life coach and said, and my family, my friends, my colleagues were all assuming, as was I, that I would just stay in that political government sector. And my coach asked me a question that completely changed the trajectory of my life. And she said, Darcy, and this was in 2013, if you were to make a decision right now on what's next for you and look back in 10 years and have no regrets, what would you do? And I said, are you kidding? I'd start my own consulting firm doing coaching and consulting and leadership development and team building and communication. And she said, great, do it. I can't do that. I'm the sole breadwinner for a family of 4. My husband stays home full time with our daughters. I need health insurance. I need to have a regular paycheck and a salary. Well, she, as good coaches do, helped me to work through. Some of those were external obstacles and some of them were really more internal gremlins. So that my last day with the Senate was January 2nd, 2013. And on January 3rd, I launched my company doing this full time. And we focus on solving people problems and the problems that get in the way of really being high performing.
That's fantastic. I mean, so we're going to have a sidebar conversation because I'm in the position right now that you actually went through in 2013, where a certain job creates your identity,
Yeah.
and then something changes, and then that identity is a real personal shift in figuring out what's next, right? But part of the stories that we celebrate here on this show is we want to celebrate leadership, we want to celebrate integrity, we want to celebrate diversity. Tell us how, Karen's in Cleveland, I'm in Los Angeles, and we love talking to people about, all these months leading up to this campaign, this presidential campaign. What was it like for, in your surrounding communities in Wisconsin being kind of one of those states where we weren't really sure what was happening politically. We weren't sure what was happening with the pandemic. We would just love to talk to somebody who's, a leader and knowledgeable in that world. What was the feeling and the state of affairs?
Mm-hmm. Right. I'm in Madison, and
Yeah.
it has been in the entire state of Wisconsin, and very much so Madison, high anxiety. Both with the pandemic, with the election, with the social unrest, and a lot of our nation's divided, and so a lot of struggle with regards to personal beliefs. And I have a lot of coaching clients and organizations that are clients that were struggling with how to create a culture in this time when some people are working remote, some people are in front lines, some people are essential workers, and everybody on different layers of that political spectrum, how to navigate that. And to me, the most important thing that I feel like this election is a symbol of unity and communication and hope, and that's part of what was getting lost, is the division and the right.
Well, Karen and I, we talk a lot about diversity, inclusion, and belonging. And so a lot of the people who have been on this podcast come from different diverse backgrounds. They have different ethnic makeups, and they're also involved in maybe the TV business or the theater business, and they're trying to promote the stories of inclusion and diversity. But really with that, I felt that comes with leadership, and that comes with wanting to step out and to, be bold and be heard, which is, my tagline for this podcast. And so I think that it all kind of intertwines, and that being somebody that has to actually fight for your personal rights is a leader, and something that I'm actually realizing more and more so, especially during this political affair, is that the rights of a gay man living in Los Angeles, I felt so incredibly protected, but didn't realize the rest of the country didn't quite get it yet. And so I'm realizing, and Karen gave me this podcast to continue to talk about human rights and human issues, and to keep celebrating and to keep growing. So we have this podcast, and you have a book. Tell us about it, and tell us about that journey to get there, because I was so inspired by the struggle. Karen and I last week talked about so much about coming out as whatever you are is about the struggle. And
Yes.
I'm really taken by your struggle with this. It didn't just happen overnight.
Right.
So
so just to provide a little bit of context and background for your listeners, in 2013, I started my business, and was really focused on leadership development and how to address people problems as it relates to communication, conflict, and trust. And I started researching and spent thousands of hours documenting and looking at what are the top themes, the struggles that get in the way of being high performing. And the result of that was my leadership model called Thoughtfully Fit. And it's a training plan for life and business success. And it's a way to be able to handle yourself thoughtfully in any situation. Instead of being on autopilot and something happens and you react, you overreact, you shut down, you yell, and then you got to use all this time and energy to go back and clean up the mess of what happened because you didn't handle yourself thoughtfully in the first place. I finalized the model on a Saturday in March, and it was like, oh my God, it was so exciting. We had all these flip charts all over and Post-it notes, and my husband was here and my team, and we were ready to launch it in the marketplace. And 5 days later, my world completely came crashing down, turned upside down when I got a phone call from my neighbor asking, what's going on at your house? And I said, I don't know, I'm not home. And she said, Darcy, there's 50 police cars and a SWAT team with guns outside your house, and they just took your husband out barefoot in handcuffs. And I said, wait, what? John, wait, what are you talking about, John? That was the beginning of my nightmare. So my husband was arrested. I found out it was for sexual assault of a minor that he had met online. And he was a full-time stay-at-home dad to our young daughters, our 2 young daughters. When he was arrested that day, he never came home.
Wow.
He was convicted. He is serving a 10-year prison sentence. And all of a sudden, I became ground zero. I had to hire an attorney. This was big, horrendous. And my attorney said, Darcy, don't talk to anybody about anything. We don't know what's going on right now. We don't know if you are a suspect. And so all of a sudden, I became ground zero to test drive this brand new, hot off the presses, thoughtfully fit model to help me navigate. Now I had more people problems than I could have ever imagined. And so that process, so John was arrested in March of 2016. And it was about 1.5 years, 2 years where the legal situation was playing out where I couldn't talk to anybody about anything. So when you talk about coming out, for me now to be sharing this story publicly, it was scary, really scary. And I feel like I'm at a place where I need to share it. It's hopefully my goal is that it will benefit others who are dealing with crisis and adversity and challenges in their lives.
Oh, absolutely. I like how you said that. It is a kind of coming out, so to speak. Whether it's good, bad, or ugly, it's a coming out. And the more you talk about it, allows you to be a healthier person. I mean, I feel for you in that story, but I'm sure it's making you a stronger woman.
There's no doubt that it's making me stronger. And, sort of that shame and fear before I came out, there was a decision point where I actually went to my team. A Brava magazine came to me. It's a women's magazine, and asked if I would be willing to share my story publicly. And I went to my team, and they all said, "No, don't do it." And I said, "Why?" And they're like, "Darcy, we've spent the last 2 years hiding and trying to, I hired a public PR communications crisis firm, trying to keep you out of this story, out of the media. Why would you now lead with it?" And I said, because it's exhausting hiding. It's exhausting holding a secret. It's exhausting not being able to just live my true self. All of me. This is now my story. It's my daughter's story. And so the other message here for your audience is, if you are in that place of fear or wondering, oh my gosh, it is so much more freeing to be able to live in your own truth.
Yeah. Darcy, it's interesting because when we were talking offline, one of the things I said to you, and I didn't know your story, and I'm so glad I didn't, because, my comment to you was, we sometimes judge people by just the way they look. And looking at you, you're highly professional, your background of your office is highly professional. And so people would look at you and say, oh, this woman doesn't have a worry in the world. And that's why we can't just look at people and make judgments. And we have to be aware, and we have to be understanding. Hearing your story, my first reaction is, I want to cry and I want to put my arms around you. But the other part is seeing your strength. And that makes me even feel so much better in life.
Yeah. And it's unfortunate that Vicky couldn't be here for this story, and she'll come on another show. But just for our listeners, the reason I was going to bring Vicky DeRosa on the show was because she was running a Fortune 500 company in New York City, very successful. And one day she went blind. And she went blind and lived in complete darkness for 3 years. She lost her job. She lost her family. She still had her kids, but she was living in complete darkness. And what she did through nutrition was she healed herself through a vegan diet and kombucha and, whatever else she did. But she, similar to Darcy, she came out the other side. And it's empowering. And I like to share these stories and tell these stories because during this pandemic that we've all just gone through and are still in, I think that it's easy to fall to the bottom rung of life, and it's harder to climb the ladder and say, I can do it. And I like having people like Darcy and Vicky and Karen in my life because guess what? They help us all to climb and stay afloat together. Because if I've learned anything during this time, it's like reach out to your friends, reach out to your community. And so we'll have Vicky on another time. But I felt there was a parallel of struggle. My struggle was the coming out story. Darcy, you've had your coming out story, and Vicky has her. She can see again, 100%. So these are amazing, brave, bold stories that we like to share on this podcast.
And I think the theme, what I'm hearing is you're sharing each of those 3 stories is being intentional on how you're moving through the challenge, whatever that challenge is, being very thoughtful, not going on autopilot, not being a victim, but, sort of choosing what do I control and how do I want to move through this?
Well, I think that, look, I'm no expert in anything. We're just talking and we're having a good time, right? But I think that you can unravel. And I think that you can in your unraveling, you can make poor decisions. And sometimes you just have to sit in that a little bit and figure out what's best, even when it's uncomfortable. And Karen, you know that because we talk about that. But sitting in the uncomfortable moment is something you got to do for a minute.
Well, and we have to learn from those uncomfortable moments, those mistakes that we may have made. Again, listening to your story, Darcy, there's probably some people who will listen to it and say, well, how did you not know? Well, it's easy not to know a lot of things that are going on around us. I went for 4 years through a state of depression, and my family had no idea because I woke up every day, put a smile on my face, went to work, and I was on autopilot, as you spoke about, and until I finally crashed. And then they looked at me and they said, how long has this been going on? And I could tell them the day it started. And they just said, but why didn't we know? Because we're all busy. We're all going in our own directions.
Yeah. I also think that the directions that we're going in, unfortunately, sometimes the physical outcome is of stuff that we almost in our head had pre-planned. And I hate to say that for things that are not great, like going blind. But Vicky, if she was here, she would say that she actually propelled that because of an unhappy thing that was going on. So, we are not the victims, but we are the outcome of our thoughts and our thinking. And so those positive thoughts, once again, have to resonate, and we have to work extra hard. We have to work extra hard to keep those thoughts really, really positive.
That's
and that's
right.
why
And
I wanted Darcy, because I know that you are positive. And I have to say, I think that almost what you've been through helps to give you a little bit of a notch on the belt, so to speak, that you are not some motivational fluffy leader, but rather
and that's like, yeah, what you just said, I mean, that's the premise in Thoughtfully Fit, right? Is being able to, at the core. So when you are thoughtfully fit, you are aware of your choices and what you control. And even when you feel like there's adversity or conflict or challenges or what have you a lot of times feel like there are no choices and you don't have control. But you always have choices. And if you can focus on what you can control, you can get through anything. Anything. I mean, Karen, when you said my beautiful office, that means so much to me, because if you could have seen the year after John's arrest, the search warrant, they destroyed my home. Every single room of my home was destroyed. Like, and not because they're bad, the police were, but it's because that's what they do. They take out every drawer, every closet, everything, and there were piles everywhere. And I had to figure out how to work through that. Sure. And I think, when if there are people who are listening saying, oh yeah, sure, it must be nice. No, there's you whatever's happening, you can make a choice and say, okay, how do I want to be through this? And what do I control to help me get through that?
Fantastic. So what are you doing to stay healthy physically? Because you seriously do look the same. Like, so you're obviously Wonder Woman still. And are you doing triathlons and constantly challenging yourself?
Yeah. So Matt and I, as Karen, you and the listeners won't know, didn't meet. We met in college, but we did a marathon together in 1998. That was also the first year I did my first triathlon, and I have done triathlons every season since. So it's my 23rd season. Now this summer, all the triathlons were canceled. So my triathlon team, we created a socially distant triathlon just so we could go out and do it on our own,
Oh my goodness.
And what's interesting that you ask about that, staying physically fit, and certainly I can't wait to hear the episode with Vicki, because thoughtfully fit is a metaphor for being physically fit. And so so I do weight training 3 times a week and kickboxing and then triathlon training. And I work hard. I didn't used to. I mean, I was a disaster. I think I've lost 70 pounds. I now make choices that align with being physically fit, but it doesn't ever end. It's not like, woo, did a marathon, done.
Right.
You have to keep training and practicing. And it's the same way with being thoughtfully fit. If you want to handle every situation in your life thoughtfully, you need to train and practice. It doesn't just happen, right?
No, I feel like I used to joke about this at my gym in West Hollywood, California, where you have some of the hottest and buffest people like you've ever seen. And you're like, okay, so if I go there for the next 2 hours, I hit the goal, right? Like I'm done. But the thing is, life is a process. Right. And this is something that I'm learning through this podcast and through talking with my friends on the show. Life really is a process. It's not a result. And it's a constant process of determination. And sometimes that sucks because you just want to get the result. But then other times it keeps you motivated. So I only brought that up, Darcy, because I know for you, it's the mind, the body, the soul.
Right? Absolutely.
And for me, it's the mind, the body, the soul. And for Karen too. We're all realizing how they're interconnected. And
you can't separate them and sort of have the impact you want and the relationships you want if you look at one in a vacuum but ignore the others.
Yeah, no, that's great. Manifest all those areas. Karen, do you have any questions for Darcy? I mean, I have a couple of last questions, but Karen, I know you have some too.
Well, as I'm listening to you and I see how you have gotten through this, how did your daughters get through this?
Oh, that's a great question, Karen. And that was my biggest fear when this happened. They had never gone a day in their lives without their dad, right? He took them to haircuts and karate and piano, and they loved their dad. And so to fast forward to the end of current state, my daughters are amazing. They are now 13 and 14, and it was not easy to get to amazing. Sure. It was a hard process. I interviewed 5 child psychologists, therapists to find the right one for them, and also to find the right for myself. And it's been a process. We now they have a relationship with their dad, they talk to him on the phone every week. They write letters. Before COVID, we would go every few months to northern Minnesota to visit him in prison. And we all have worked hard to find forgiveness in our hearts. And I feel like that's, for me, the biggest gift that I could give my daughters in this world, is to not live with anger and resentment, but how to find compassion. He screwed up, he really messed up, and he's a human. He just like, and I think, who in our world wouldn't be mortified if your worst decision was on the news and the public knew? Now, we're divorced. I've made a very clear boundary there, and I can still be in relationship with him, and I'm praying for him to find his healing that he can, and dealing with, he had sex addiction and all sorts of things that he was struggling with that he's now facing.
And
that's huge. That
yeah.
is so huge.
And what you're saying is that we all need to find forgiveness, because when we don't, that anger, it hurts us more than it hurts the other person. And I've seen that throughout my whole life. I went through a divorce many, many years ago. And for years, I was angry. I blamed him for everything. And, our son now is a grown adult. And I finally had to come to a point at my son's age, to say, you know what? We both screwed up. We both messed up. And so we went our separate ways. I'm no longer blaming you, and I'm not going to blame myself either. And we both have wonderful lives now. But that took a long time, and I'm sure it wasn't easy for you and your girls, but you found that road, and you're redeeming him and yourselves. And that's wonderful.
And I want to highlight what you said, you forgave yourself. I also had to forgive myself for, how did I not see this? How did I not protect my girls? How did I? And that self-compassion is an important part too.
Yep, absolutely.
There is. But you said something, Darcy, that is so true, that resonates through every conversation, is that we're human.
Yes.
We are all human. Mistakes are going to happen. Humans, we make errors. And it's unfortunate that some of our mistakes are put on the news. That's unfortunate. But we all make them, and there is no error in God's eye, if you will, that's bigger or smaller than any other. So I think the message I'm taking away from this podcast today is not only how important it is to celebrate diversity, inclusion, belonging, and leadership, but also forgiveness. And we have a lot to forgive from these previous 4 years that we just went through.
Yes, and I tell you, Matt, that was one of the biggest fears I had in putting my story out there publicly and writing the book. The book's coming out in May of 2021, called Thoughtfully Fit, Training Plan for Life and Business Success. And it's a hybrid book of the story of what happened when my husband was arrested, and how I used this leadership model to help me through it. And one of my biggest fears, and it still is a fear in putting my story out there publicly, is being judged for forgiving my husband for doing something that, for many people is unforgivable. And I just can't live in a world where we can't find forgiveness.
No, in Hollywood, we call that peeling the onion back, and we call that the layers. And the layers that you're going to have in that book have the qualities of a best-selling book, because it now has the layers that it did not have before. And it brings a human quality to it. Again, I'm no expert. I'm not a publisher. I'm just saying from my experience, you now are able to have that book that is an onion, and everyone's going to take something different away from it. So it's wonderful. I'm so happy to see you and for you to share this story with us. And so the book comes out 2021. Is it done?
The full manuscript is done. My editor has it right now, and we're working on, we've got the title, we've got the third round of cover drafts, and so almost have the cover ready. And then pre-sales will start in early 2021. Okay.
Well, Vicky DeRosa is also doing TED Talks, and she's also got a book coming out. So it might be great to have you guys back on when you guys can both talk about your books.
I would love that.
Yeah, because that could be a really special thing. So thank you for being here, Darcy. It's been great. Karen, thank you for setting up this forum of conversation and enlightenment and just learning about each other.
It really is wonderful that you had this vision, Karen, and Matt is the perfect host. Oh my gosh. I just adore you, Matt. And I'm excited for what, the journey that you're on and to learn and grow. And if I might offer, for those people who are listening and say they want more, I've got on thoughtfullyfit.com, I did 3 videos that talk about what happened in the immediate aftermath and how did I actually tell my girls. And
Great.
So at thoughtfullyfit.com, you can go in and put your email address and get a copy, and those videos will be emailed to you, just in case people are listening and want to go deeper. Yeah,
for sure. I mean, I have so much takeaway from this that I've been writing and trying to secretly write into my notebook during the podcast, but I have so much takeaway. And Darcy, we're going to have a sidebar conversation.
I look forward to it, Matt.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, give our love to your daughters. I mean,
yeah, huge hugs to your daughters. Yep.
Extremely, you have to be so proud of them. So
I am so proud of them. My daughter asked me last week, she said, Mom, I've got to write a story for my English class. I said, okay, if I write a piece about Daddy? And I said, well, of course it's okay. She said, well, I thought you'd be okay with it because you wrote the book and all, but I'm a little scared. And I said, yeah, of course you're scared and it's okay. It just is I feel so blessed that they're in this place of healing and forgiveness as well.
It's wonderful.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, we'll be back again next week. Okay, Matt?
Sounds great.
Sounds great. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you, Darcy.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.